Greetings. This is Morning Sky. I'm your host, Sky. Let's get into it. President Trump is deploying National Guardsmen and women and federalizing city police in the District of Columbia, right outside his executive mansion, the White House. This is a very, very scary, kind of move. This is creepy because he's saying, he wants to defeat crime. He wants to get criminals off the streets and homeless people off the street. In reality, if you look at any statistics, this isn't about ideas. This is all numbers and facts. I mean, some numbers are fudged. That's true, but in this case, it's not true. He is using this specific law to govern how people of DC, of District of Columbia, are supposed to be taken in. And there was just a recent report that a man was fatally shot just a few hours after the mandate was put in place by the president. I just think he has priorities all in disarray. Instead of going after government regulations and controls, he wants to, show himself like he's some kind of, a cowboy or something like that. I don't know. It's like he's not focused on the right things. This is almost like a distraction. This is like a despicable move against the people of the district, Chocolate City as it's called. Even the mayor, I think it's Muriel. She had her reservations about what Trump plans to do and what the National Guards people plan on doing. I just want to say that he's just out of his element. He has no idea what he's doing. He really feels everything. He doesn't think. He feels. He emotes. He puts into a position where he wants to do something and feels like it's the right thing to do, but it's not. It's not at all the right thing to do. So, that's why you have the National Guard deployed in DC under a provision that was never used before in any history of any political or presidential office in the history of this nation. That should tell you something. That should be telling. And then, like I said, the numbers are not fudged. Women lie, men lie, numbers don't lie. Usually there's an asterisk next to that because sometimes people fudge numbers, but for the most part, numbers are the truth. And statistics say that since the pandemic, which spiked in crimes across the board, robbery, rape, murder, heavy, serious crimes, not just like purse snatchers, which is serious and something like that, but not as much as a murder. So, I think with the deployment of National Guards people, of the National Guard, that is going to be a mar against his already, tarnished and ugly and distorted presidency, both presidencies, 45 and 47, and especially 47. I think he just like turned up the heat in 47 is this administration. Salute to you, Rick James. Salute to you, Texas. I see you. Hips don't. I don't know why I can't. It used to show me when comments were made. Now it doesn't show me when the comments are made. I don't know if that's on their part, my part. I don't know. But anyway, there's a disconnect. There's a serious disconnect with Trump not acknowledging statistics, facts, numbers, data. You can argue all day about ideas. We can say, there is a God, there is no God, and then there is no God. But you can make your argument, whatever. It's gonna be proven wrong, but you can't prove these numbers aren't the truth. In the last 20 years, crime has gone down significantly in DC. In the last 30 years, it has plummeted. 35 years. It has gone down tremendously from the height of the crack era. And then now we have, fentanyl and everything like that. And that's the sad part too, because he wants to have departments of the interior, drug enforcement agency. He wants to have all these different things lined up for what? For what? There's no crime in drugs. I've stated this multiple times on this platform. There is no victim in a trade of a narcotic or a scheduled substance, and for payment, for money, for dollars. There's no victims whatsoever. Nobody gets hurt on by somebody, the other person, on in most cases. In most they wouldn't have the money if they didn't have smooth transactions most of the time. What's sad is it's illegal, and that what makes it very a hostile business. It makes it very hostile, because the thing is, it's like it could be by the police. You either dead or in jail. The police will get you, or your friends will rat on you, or snitch on you, or they'll kill you. And I'm for snitching. Snitch. Definitely snitch. But I have this video clip. This should elucidate a little bit more. See what happens. Let me see.
Declaring a public safety emergency, saying he's activated 800 National Guard members in the nation's capital and has now placed the D.C. Police Department under federal control, saying that Attorney General Pam Bondi will, quote, take command. This takeover is happening as the president says that crime in the city is out of control, despite officials saying that certain crimes in the city have hit a 30-year low. Watch this.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. If necessary, we're going to move service members directly to joining the Guardsmen, and that'll take place very rapidly.
CNN's Brian Todd is closely following this story for us. So, Brian, take us through President Trump's order and what else he's threatening, because he says he might activate the military.
That's right, Boris. He says he's kind of reserving the option to activate additional military units in Washington, D.C. if need be. He then later said he didn't think he would need them, but he's going to keep that option open. He is also considering at least expanding the National Guard deployment to other cities. He named Chicago and New York City. But let's see how this plays out in Washington, D.C. first. We do have some sourced reporting from three sources familiar with the matter saying that both the D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith did not know of President Trump's announcement prior to when he made the announcement. They were caught kind of unaware of this prior to when he made the announcement this morning. As you see the graphic there, the president plans to mobilize some 800 National Guard members on the city streets here in D.C. to put the D.C. police under federal control. That is unprecedented, by the way. A president of the United States has never taken control of the D.C. Metropolitan Attorney General Brian Schwab has issued this statement, quote, "The administration's actions are unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. There is no crime emergency in the District of Columbia. Violent crime in D.C. reached historic 30-year lows last year and is down another 26% so far this year. We are considering all of our options and will do what's necessary to protect the rights and safety of district residents." Attorney General Schwab is correct there when he says that crime is down in D.C. According to the D.C. Metropolitan Police, violent crime is down 26%, assaults with a dangerous weapon down 20%, robberies down 29%, and crime overall is at historic lows in this city, Boris. We also got some pushback from Council Member Charles Allen of the D.C. City Council saying this is doing this under the guise of public safety is, quote, wrong. It's an extreme, outrageous, and dangerous move for the city. That is the first member of the D.C. City Council to push back in earnest to this move. Boris?
Brian Todd, thank you so much for the reporting. Danny?
Boris, thank you. Former FBI Deputy Director and CNN Senior Law Enforcement Analyst Andrew McCabe joins us now. We also have former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman. Thank you, gentlemen, for breaking down this very important story. Andrew, I want to start with you. From your perspective, is the purpose of this action purely to have just a massive show of force on the streets of D.C., or in practice, is there anything that will be done differently with the police department under federal control?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what the purpose is, right? So we know what the ostensible purpose is, the facts that, or the, I don't want to even call them facts, the information that the president cited during his press conference, which of course included comparing DC to places like Baghdad and Bogota, Colombia, where we have no accurate reporting about what their crime statistics are. The fact is that the crime situation in DC is at all-time lows. They were at a 30-year low last year, and it's down an additional 26% this year. So there is no crime emergency per se in the city. So when you understand that, to try to divine what the purpose is of this deployment of National Guard assets, what this reallocation of things like FBI agent resources to patrol the streets of DC, it raises some important questions. Like, what is it? Why this production? Why this kind of Potemkin village of criminal intervention in a city? What is this designed to distract us from? I don't know that I can answer that for you here, but in effect, taking a federal official and simply calling him the head of the Metropolitan Police Department changes nothing within the Metropolitan Police Department. Those sworn officers are the only people who are legally authorized to enforce the law outside of the federal properties in DC. Most of DC is not federal property. It is the property of the District of Columbia. And I should also say, to deprive the people, the citizens of the District of Columbia, of the representatives who they elected. They elect a mayor, they elect a city council. They are entitled to hold those folks responsible for the crime situation and every other situation in DC. To completely replace that sort of authority with some specious federal authority is really concerning, I think, as a democratic matter, a democracy issue writ large.
Harry, I want to bring you into the conversation. Aside from what this may look like on the ground today or tomorrow in D.C., it seems like the thing that actually also caught a lot of people's attention, and Brian Todd just mentioned it, was this warning that President Trump basically said that this sort of action might come to other cities across the country. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's really an important point, because it's true that he has somewhat greater authority, a fair bit greater authority in DC itself, though everything I think that Andy says is accurate. That goes away when he's talking about Chicago, when he's talking about Los Angeles. And by the way, he mentioned only, of course, Democratic cities. The two highest cities in murder rates are both Republicans. They didn't come out. But there, a whole survey of different laws come into effect, including the really important law. It's a mouthful, Posse Comitatus Act, that says you can't do this on the streets. You can't bring in the military. So to the extent he's trying to align it with some grand showing of what he's going to do in Democratic cities, he's going to be up against much higher legal barriers.
You know, Andrew, we heard pushback, as Brian Todd reported, just after the announcement came, but there wasn't as much pushback from, say, the D.C. mayor leading up to this. I'm curious if there's anything in particular about this, again, going into practice that worries you, especially if we might potentially see American citizens in any sort of confrontation with, say, FBI agents or National Guard members.
Yeah, there's a lot that worries me about this. You know, first of all, it's hard to explain the lack of pushback by DC authorities right now. I suspect they're probably trying to get their heads around this entire thing because it's absolutely so bizarre. Apparently, they had no notice of it. There is also the matter of congressional funding, which basically took away $1 billion from DC this year. So the Senate is trying to restore that. The House is not willing. So there's a very kind of compelling financial / political issue that they're trying to navigate at the same time, which might be having an impact on how vocally they want to push back. Nevertheless, you are now looking at things like having hundreds of FBI agents, quote unquote, patrol the streets of DC. This is not something that FBI agents do. They're not trained for it. They don't plan on that. They don't have that sort of legal authority intrinsically. To understand exactly how FBI agents are going to start making arrests around DC, again, on areas that are not federal property, that is not something that has been worked out in any way. And now let's think about the opportunity cost. All of those counterterrorism cases, counterintelligence cases, criminal cases, crimes against children, all the things that we rely on FBI agents to protect us from every day, that work is not getting done because you've taken that resource, some percentage of it, and shifted it to patrolling DC, which is something that the FBI does not do and really cannot do in its current state competently or safely for themselves or for the citizens of the district. So really questionable decisions here that will have major impacts on the safety and security of this country.
Harry, just really quickly, I want to get your perspective on this because President Trump also said that he will bring in the military if needed, essentially beyond the National Guard. Just a quick thought. How much authority does he have to use the military in this sort of way?
Some authority to use it temporarily with congressional notification. So DC is a lot weaker here, but Congress comes to the fore. They're the ones that passed the DC Home Control Act. 48 hours, then has to notify, 30 days, then Congress has to pass. So basically, he's taking a very limited grant of authority and making a big political case with it, exactly as Andrew specifies.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting 30 days to come in the nation's capital. Andrew McCabe, Harry Littman, thank you both for breaking all of that down for us. Really do appreciate it.
Now, you see, that is the insanity. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's unhinged. Trump is unhinged. He wants to get rid of homeless people. You know how you get rid of homeless people? You get rid of government regulations and controls. You free up the economy. Get rid of every single strangulation, throttle, business that's throttled or strangled because of regulations and controls. Give people the opportunity to get work. And with that work, they get no income taxes. No income taxes, more money in their pockets. They're able to buy houses. They're able to buy apartments. That's how you get rid of the homeless problem. It's as simple as that. There's no other way around it. Simple as that. There's no questioning. No, well, what about the poor? What about the poor are okay. They're not in a developing nation. Poor people have cell phones. Poor people have cars in this country. Poor people make $20,000 a year. That's a little bit of money. But compared to places in the world, that's a fortune. And have homeless people be put in certain, I guess, camps. I don't know what he's going to do with them. He just says, to get rid of lawlessness and the homeless. He never really specified, or I didn't see him specifying any of the verbiage he used. It just is goofy to me. It's goofy and sad at the same time because we have a president that's so unhinged that he doesn't even realize it himself. He doesn't even show himself to be an upstanding individual. And that is what scares a lot of people. It doesn't scare me. I'm not afraid. Either you're running free or you're running scared. How you're running. That's what the late, great Paul Mooney once asked. How you're running. Well, Rich James, I say it's goofy because it's weird. It's strange, and it's not of normalcy. It's goofy. It's a weird space to be in for Donald Trump. Rot with me says you're shook. Paul's Mooney was into men. Give me the specific incidents. I read his book. I watched his episodes. I would love to see that. I think it was long awaited. What was long awaited? There is no evidence that Paul Mooney was homosexual, was gay, or queer. I don't know. I'm starting to say queer. I'm not even gonna say gay anymore. I'm gonna say queer. Honey, nothing. There's a method to the madness, and has been if you pay attention. I disagree with you, King. I disagree with you. I think there's just madness. It's just madness for Trump to make this friction. Okay. Yeah. He's calling on not only the National Guard but military people at large, the Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and well, maybe not the Coast Guard, but maybe not the Space Force, but probably the Army and the Marines, most likely. Maybe a few naval personnel. But it's just completely ironic. It's ironic that a city that has been repaired after decades of bloodshed and corruption and disgustingness has pretty much just about leveled out. It hasn't. I mean, Bogota, Colombia is worse than the District of Columbia. King says, okay, what happened to the Elon Musk beef? They was acting to cut down on interference with the agenda. I don't know. I think the Elon Musk, that kind of dissipated. They're like on, cool terms. They're not like heavy buddy. This is my friend and we're all in this together and all that nonsense. I think that has changed tremendously. What happened to Don Boños beef once acting? Dan Boños beef. I don't even know about Dan Boños. This is news to me. I'm telling the truth. You got to pay close attention. Okay. I will pay close attention to the Dan Boños. Is that how you pronounce his name? Boños? That's what it looks like to me. You got to pay close attention. That's why I'm doing these shows. I get to learn more from you guys than many. I do my research, of course. But, once it's out here, I'm flying. I jumped out the plane. I'm looking for the parachute. Bongino. Okay. Gotcha. Bongino. I got you, King Hazy. Salute to you. Thank you for the information, sir. All right. To show you that I am bipartisan, and I can show you from CNN. I can show you from Fox News as well. So here we go.
So we watched it together. President Trump wrapping up a lengthy news conference, declaring today Liberation Day in our nation's capital. And he promises to aggressively crack down on crime and clean up what he calls our once beautiful capital. The White House says these efforts are in line with an executive order the president signed in March to make D.C. safer. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Emily Compagno. Also joining us today, Carly Shimkus, co-host of Fox and Friends First, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, and John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley law professor, and former Justice Thomas law clerk. Well, here is the president moments ago.
This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. Today, we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. You want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house where you live and feel safe and go into a store to buy a newspaper or buy something. And you don't have that now.
Look, the president really leaned hard on the big picture, because it's not just about Washington, D.C. It's about soft on crime policies across America. For example, he's going after no cash bail laws, and he's going really hammering down on liberal prosecutors in Democratic-led cities like New York and Chicago.
We have other cities also that are bad, very bad. You look at Chicago, how bad it is. You look at Los Angeles, how bad it is. We have other cities that are very bad. New York has a problem. And then you have, of course, Baltimore and Oakland. We don't even mention that anymore. They're so far gone. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to lose our cities over this. And this will go further. We're starting very strongly with D.C., and we're going to clean it up real quick, very quickly, as they say.
John, that sounds like a shot across the bow. We are not going to lose our cities over this. This is more than just a shout out to the criminals. This is those blue-led cities and the way that they're doing business legally.
It's a good point, Harris. Look, the president can't do a lot about crime in the inner cities in places like Oakland, where I work, or San Francisco, where I'm from, or Philadelphia, where I grew up. These are places where crime has gone out of control. But the one place that the president can put law and order into effect is Washington, D.C. Our founders made the District of Columbia a federal city. They didn't want it under the control of Virginia or Maryland or any other state. It is uniquely the duty and responsibility of the president to enforce the laws, and those laws include the criminal laws for public safety in Washington, D.C. Now, he doesn't just need to nationalize the D.C. police and declare an emergency, which can go on for 30 days. He can send in federal law enforcement, which he's done. He can send in the National Guard. There's no governor to fight with, like the governor of California, to send the National Guard in. They're not limited to being there for 30 days. It's going to take time, but I think the president can use D.C. to produce good policies and demonstrate to the rest of the country how to turn around their crime-ridden inner cities.
So real quickly, so what we heard the president do today is he put the D.C. police under the AG Pam Bondi's control after announcing that the people from the feds will be in charge. That's what you're talking about.
Yes. Under the Home Rule Act of 1973, the president can take over the D.C. police, but that doesn't apply to the other law enforcement assets Paul was just talking about in your last show, the DEA, the FBI, and then, of course, the National Guard. Now, look, if you had to ask me, I think this whole home rule thing has been a mistake and a constitutional error, because I don't think it was a good idea for the federal government to ever give D.C. self-government. That was not what the founders intended. They wanted the federal government to always remain in control of the District of Columbia. So we're seeing 50 years now of misrule, misgovernment. The murder rate in D.C. has historically always been higher than in other cities in the country.
That's fascinating, Emily, because we're actually technically watching the rates of crime fall across the country. But in certain areas, it's the pure violence of the crime that's popping right now as an outbreak, coupled with people living on the streets and encampments in many of those blue-led cities.
Right. And if D.C. was a state, it would be the highest homicide rate per capita 4 years running. It's been, frankly, an abominable destruction of what could have been a very peaceful and, I think, example of how government should run. I think what I love about this, and I say it with a caveat that this is the first step, there was an excellent articulation today of exactly why this perfect storm has been created. And we saw firsthand as a White House press corps member talked about how he had been robbed at gunpoint by a child and nothing happened. The trauma and the stress are real, and there are lives we cannot get back, including that of a White House intern whose mother to this day says, please, President Trump, do something, right? So here we're seeing that. So we saw the articulation of why things have gotten to this point, and that's the failure of policies, the reclassification of crimes, activists, judges, feckless prosecutors alike. We know it, right? We talk about it all the time. So here we are seeing the president come in and do something, and then during this time will set things right. But it's now up, I believe, to Congress and these cities to take this next step. Because the worst thing ever would be once this president leaves and then all the sand just goes back into the hole and it restores back to normal. So we need to set this precedent and then have it remain. So all these other blue cities that people have given up on have a fighting chance too.
Well, and
I'm going to stop her right there. She said if D.C. was a state, well, obviously it would be per capita. They had to say per capita because states obviously have hundreds of thousands to millions of people. And D.C. has what? A few 100,000, maybe a million people. But it's not a state. It's not. It's a city. So I think what she was trying to get at is the fact that, trying to equate whole states with multiple cities like California and New York and Maryland and different things like that. We talked about Oakland and Baltimore. It doesn't equate. It doesn't add up. It doesn't match. You really can't compare the states to a city. There's multiple people that inhabit the states rather than the city. It could be close in numbers to a specific city. I understand that, but we become desensitized. That's the worst thing. That's the D word, desensitized, with the fact that Chicago has Labor Day, a Memorial Day, shootings, 14 people shot, 3 dead, and July 4th, 15, 20 people shot, 6 dead, something crazy. Labor Day, 24 people shot, 7, 8 dead. It's not going to be just cracking skulls and doing whatever the hell they want to do. That's what he said. That's what President Trump literally said out of his mouth. He said they can do whatever the hell they want. He said that. That is scary. This is coming from the top. This isn't like some right wing nut, even though I guess that's what you can call him. But this isn't somebody in a lower station. This is the president of the United States of America that's saying all this. That's what's so profound. I'm gonna restart it.
the president said he's not going to give up. He said, we're not going to lose control. So all those cities had better wake up because he's serious about this. Look, I don't want to put our team in our control room too much in hot water here, but do you guys have from the U.S. Attorney of D.C., Jeanine Pirro, talking about the kids, if you will? Because coming out of what Emily said, I think, all right, let's watch this.
I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are. They can be in DuPont Circle, but they know that we can't touch them. Why? Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I convict someone of shooting another person with an illegal gun on a public bus in the chest, intent to kill, I convict him. And you know what the judge gives him? Probation. Says you should go to college. We need to go after the D.C. Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this concept.
Lisa.
Well, look, this is brilliant, especially that show of force that we just saw during this press conference, this Liberation Day for Washington, D.C. Look, the Democrat Party has become the party of crime and disorder, and the Republican Party is the party of law and order. And what President Trump is doing in Washington, D.C. will underscore this point, because just like how he was able to bring, we saw record highs of border crossings under Joe Biden and then record lows under President Trump in short order. That's what we're going to see in Washington, D.C. And we saw under the Obama administration where he appended the criminal justice system, where somehow it was racist to arrest criminals, which ended up putting minority communities even more at risk. And then what we saw under Joe Biden with open borders as well, just this lawlessness in the Democrat Party. So he's going to underscore this point and put these mayors in these blue cities on notice, because why won't they protect their citizens when they can? It's not an issue of being able to. It's an issue that they don't want to. And then also, I'll just go through. There's been a long list of members of Congress, staffers, and the intern that was also murdered that have been attacked. You had Henry Cuellar was carjacked at gunpoint, member of Congress. Congresswoman Angie Craig attacked in her apartment complex. Senator Rand Paul had a staffer that was stabbed as well. And then, of course, those two Israeli embassy staffers that were executed recently in Washington, D.C. I also will finally just note that even in 2023, we saw a bipartisan effort with Joe Biden to override a rewrite of Washington, D.C.'s criminal code that tried to do, softening on crime. So there has already been a demonstration of a bipartisan desire to get this under control.
Yeah, and the president also, during his remarks, read the long list of victims of Washington, D.C. crime. And the person that I'm thinking about today is Nasratullah Amanyar, who worked as an Afghan interpreter, came to the United States and was murdered as a Lyft driver, working a shift as a Lyft driver in Washington, D.C., which means that he survived Taliban rule, working for the U.S. government, came to the United States for safety, and then was killed in our nation's capital. And Harris, to your point, the person who killed him was 14 years old at the time, and he received a 3-year sentence. And it was actually supposed to be a 1.5 years, and the judge said that that was too light. So what President Trump and Jeanine Pirro are trying to do is increase that, because a lot of these young people are being used for their youth.
100%.
Because the older people in the gangs know that they won't get a severe sentence. So then you see these, not even teenagers sometimes, 12, 13-year-olds committing heinous crimes. I spoke to the mother of Eric Tarpinian Jackson, the congressional intern who was shot in June, and she talked about the horror of how young these victims are and how it felt to her to realize that her child, her baby, who she called a gift from God, didn't get shot one time but was riddled with bullets. So that's the reality that she's living in, and that's what President Trump is trying to stop.
Real quickly, John, we'll bring it back to you here. How hard is it to get that age lowered from 18 to where where the crime reflects that it needs to be?
Look, the way it is now with this special treatment of juvenile offenders is a product of this kind of woke revolution in criminal law that I think President Trump and the federal government are trying to stop. Now, President Trump and the federal government and states and localities can try to change the laws and say we're not going to treat murderers differently because they're 17, because they're 16. Some of the courts might push back, but this, I think, would be an ideal moment to try to go back to the courts and say the crime problem is so out of control with young murderers that we need to start treating people who commit adult crimes like adults.
Yeah, my big question is, do you really see a change in their behaviors by letting them go early on these horrible crimes? Like, do they get turned around by society, or is there the same rate of recidivism among them as there is for adults?
Actually, the data from D.C. itself is that the juveniles appear to have higher rates of going back to crime than the adults do, because they know they're rational, they're not dummies. They know they're going to be treated specially and get off on earlier sentences.
Well, and they have more years to do it. Yeah, because they're out.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee
I missed. Didn't mean to do that. Let me see. I'm looking for a YouTube video that we did not see.
Meanwhile,
we'll get to that a little bit later. I just gotta run my mouth. It's King. We differ, sir. I'm actually too stupid. That's why I got Rick James, you yourself, Rod with me in here. Texas was in here for a little while. He must have stepped out. But I learn more from this channel. I'll say it again and again. I learn more from this channel than I do from just the research. Because I do the research, but then once you're done, it's like training. You have to be in the field. When you're in the field, you're not in training anymore. So I appreciate it. Let me see. Let me get rid of this right now. Yeah. So yeah, King Hazy says, how could you not see he has to say one thing and do another in order to overcome corruption? Come on, Sky. You smarter than that. I'm really not smarter than that. I'm a community college dropout. It takes me a while to figure things out. I get lost in the sauce. I get messed up. That's just the facts. Rick James says Skylar Saunders sees preps for 3 hours prior to the showtime. Fact. No, I know. It's probably half hour to an hour, if that. But I wanted to say about the various assertions about the crime and the specific examples. At least they gave us specific examples, but that's not like a whole picture. Those are tiny little dots. Like in the famous picture, Surratt, he made pointillism, the little dots. They're looking at the little dots, not looking at the grand scheme of the picture. They're looking at the little dots. Little dots are important because they make up the picture. I'm not saying that they're not, but you know the vandalism, the robbery at gunpoint, the attack, and the apartment complex, different things like this are isolated incidents. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Actually, I'm not sorry. That's what it is. The overall, scheme of DC is, not about crime anymore. It's like I said, in the past 2 decades, it's plummeted. Even with this spike in 2020, and I think in 2023 as well, it has seen a decrease in overall, crimes of robbery, rape, sexual assault, murder, obviously homicide. That's part of the whole idea of DC. It's really risen from the ashes as once was. Because 35 years ago wasn't nothing pretty. 1990, that's when the crack era hit DC hard. It was crazy. Baltimore pretty much hasn't recovered. I mean, Baltimore is a different city. It's a heroin city more so than cocaine and crack rocks. There were crack rocks in Baltimore, but it's mainly heroin. That's the main trade in that city. And we've seen that from, TV shows like The Wire. We were able to divine different characters and the different scenarios that they played. And, you can understand better what the city represented and what it continues to represent. But I just don't see the National Guard or the military at large going into cities and doing whatever the hell they want, according to the president. Just with the mess. Okay, I can't confirm nor deny that. Right with me. I don't know anything about that. But yeah, so I just am just, that's the thing. He overlooks, like, I guess that's when you're talking about King Hazy. He says one thing, and in order to overcome corruption, he never says anything about statistics or facts in regard to truth. They must be fudge numbers or irrelevant numbers. Who is she though? Right with me. I don't know. Is she one of the people on the radio? Is she a presenter? Is she a content creator? I don't know who Justice the Mess is. I'm lost in the sauce. That's what I'm saying. I learned a lot from the show. It was funny how Sir Rick James said something about DuPont Circle, and then Janine Pereiro, I think her name is, mentioned DuPont Circle. I never heard of DuPont Circle. I thought so. That's why I said, is she a content creator or a radio host or something like that? But I thought Justice the Mess, was it Justice the Mess? I'm trying to remember. Is she really literally born into the crack era? Was she literally born? Or are you just saying that? Rock with me. I thought Jess, is there a difference between Just Hilarious and Jess with the Mess? Is that the same person? Did she leave the Breakfast Club? I'm trying to remember. I don't listen to the Breakfast Club anymore. She's 30. Okay. DuPont Circle is the gay area of DC. Fact. Well, I didn't know that. I never even heard of DuPont Circle. I heard of K Street. K Street is where all the lobbyists are. K Street. I knew that. Just with the nostrils. Oh, same person. Okay, I got you. I thought it was just hilarious. It's just hilarious. Okay, got you. See, I learned a lot. I'm in the field right now. You know, once you're in the field and rounds are coming down range, it's a lot different than training. You're trained to be focused on your task and your mission, but it's hell. It's chaos. It's wild. It's anything goes, and you're without your drill instructor. So, well, we're not having a party today. 5 more people will make it a party. Rick James. Where did Marcellus go? Where did they go? I don't know where everybody went. I have 984 subscribers. I have no idea where they are. If one of them gave me $1, I'll be close to $1,000. Just gave me $1. I haven't had a donation in weeks. Bummer doesn't salute in hate room. I don't know what 07 is. And I don't know what is that? Oh, Marcellus with the dancing. Death Row. Oh, 07. Okay. Death Row. Okay, great. But anyway, but this is Trump. This is the same guy who said that drug dealers should be given the death penalty. Now, if that's not vicious and ugly and disgusting to you, you might want to check yourself. You might want to check yourself, because that is like the worst thing you can possibly say. Well, it's not the worst thing you can possibly say, but you know what I mean. It's pretty terrible. Drug dealers. And it's not just that. It's the FDA. When are they going to shut down the FDA and sell it off to a private company? When are they going to sell off the EPA? When are they going to sell off OSHA? When are they going to sell off NOAA and all the other alphabet soup? Get rid of the DEA. And they're supposed to be coming down to DC too. Rick James says, Skylar Saunders sees sometimes you are for the death penalty. Over times you're against it. Me, no. I'm for the death penalty for those that are beyond the shadow of a doubt guilty of a heinous crime such as rape or murder. That's it. Or, mass murder or something of that nature. You blew up a federal building, or you tried to blow up your shoe or something like that. Like that's what I'm saying for people that should be on death row. Not drug dealers. Definitely not drug dealers. All right, so I got another video I'm going to play. One second.
President Trump is vowing to take back the Capitol. That announcement made in a highly anticipated press conference at the White House earlier this morning. The president took to that podium to outline his plan to crack down on crime in his own backyard, and says he plans to do that with the help of the National Guard. Listen to him talk about why he decided to put those boots on the ground on the streets of D.C.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. And worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. Deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. And you people are victims of it, too. You know, you're reporters, and I understand a lot of you tend to be on the liberal side, but you don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed. And you all know people and friends of yours that happened. And so you can be anything you want, but you want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house where you live and feel safe and go into a store to buy a newspaper or buy something. And you don't have that now.
Okay, so let's take a look at the numbers from the Metropolitan Police Department. As of Friday, homicides are actually down 12% compared to last year. Robberies are down 28%, and total violent crime is down 26%. We have team coverage on this. Standing by for us is CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. But first, let's go to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Willie, the numbers don't lie, and they show crime in the city is actually declining. Now, despite that, the president insists crime numbers are getting worse. So what stood out to you during his press conference earlier today?
Yeah, that's right, Liz. As you perfectly pointed out, violent crime is down here in the District of Columbia, according to the Metropolitan Police Department, those statistics that you showed there. But nonetheless, the president making this push, calling about an emergency order, essentially taking control of the Metropolitan Police Department. Now, that starts a process, a notification process to Congress, which essentially would mean that he would have to outline the reasons why he is doing this within the next 48 hours. Then it allows the president to move forward and continue controlling through the Department of Justice, Attorney General Pam Bondi, who he has really put in charge here of doing that, to maintain control of the Metropolitan Police Department for up to 30 days. And then he would get the buy-in of Congress. We, of course, know that Congress is controlled by the Republicans, so we could perhaps win that argument there. But the president talked about a couple of different situations and crimes that happen in the district as the reason why he is doing this. Take a listen to what he said earlier.
A Democrat congressman was also carjacked at gunpoint not far from the Capitol. And in 2023, an aide to Senator Rand Paul was stabbed in the chest and head by a demented lunatic as he walked down the street, just absolutely for no reason. Horrifically, last July 4th weekend, a 3-year-old girl was shot in the head and killed while sitting in a car near the Capitol. It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness. And we're getting rid of the slums, too. We have slums here. We're getting rid of them.
Now, the president is also targeting homeless encampments as well. And he pointed out the murder rate using these White House figures there. He tried to compare the murder rate of D.C. To other capitals around the world. Now, it's worth pointing out that some of these other capitals, some of these other countries will perhaps have different gun laws. But still, nonetheless, the president calling about this emergency power, taking control of the Metropolitan Police Department. We now know that some 800 members of the D.C. National Guard are going to be deploying throughout the streets of D.C. in large part to just simply have a presence as a deterrent for criminal activity in the district. Over the weekend, more than 400 federal law enforcement personnel deployed throughout the district to have that maintain that presence as well to deter crime. But this is a major move by this president, despite crime being lower, violent crime, I should say, being lowered than what we saw last year, Liz.
Yeah, Willie, another moment that stood out to me from the press conference was when D.C.'s newly top prosecutor, Jeanine Pirro, took to the mic, and she talked about cracking down on crime committed by teenagers, people under the age of 18. So what did she say about that?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, she was just over my shoulder here just moments ago talking to some folks here on the White House North Lawn after doing an interview. This is in large part a focus on teenagers, those individuals under 18 committing violent crimes or carjackings in the district. Now, the newly minted U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia essentially said that she can't touch some of these cases, because if it doesn't involve murder or extreme violent crimes like rape, she can't touch them. She said some changes need to be made there. Now, this has been a local issue where you have some of these individuals who are quite young, anywhere between the ages of 12 and 17, committing some of these crimes, committing carjackings. And the criticism here, in large part, is focused on the Attorney General of the District of Columbia, who critics say is unwilling to go after some of these juveniles, unwilling to try them as adults. Essentially, critics will point out saying that they get a slap on the wrist after committing some of these crimes. So that is part of the focus here, at least from the White House, hoping to make some changes, but in large part hoping to send a message not only throughout the district, but around the country to those other cities that the president is willing to take this extreme move, this move to call about those emergency powers to essentially lower crime here in the district, although statistics will point out that crime is much lower than we have seen in recent years, Liz.
CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Thank you so much, Willie. Good to see you. All right, let's lean into this story a little bit more and bring in CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, what were your key takeaways from the president's announcement to deploy the National Guard to the streets of D.C.?
Well, certainly the big takeaway here is obviously what President Trump has done earlier in his term in relation to law enforcement and the Capitol area. I think it's hard to ignore the fact that President Trump did pardon hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were convicted or charged for their actions on January 6, 2021. And President Trump, Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, Attorney General Pam Bondi all spoke about, a warning that these troops, needed to be respected when they're in Washington, D.C. And I think, we saw obviously many law enforcement officials get attacked on that day, and their assaulters were then pardoned by this administration, and in some cases actually hired by them. I don't think you rule that out in the context of what we're seeing now. And in addition to that, it's just, the expansion of what we saw in Los Angeles a couple of months ago by bringing in the National Guard to actually quell some unrest there in very, particular street corners and neighborhoods where ICE activity was happening. Now the Trump administration is applying that model to an entire city where there certainly is not nearly the amount of unrest. There's not burning of vehicles or mass protests going on here in D.C., although President Trump does have a limited but real authority of how he can do this. So certainly it looks like the Washington, D.C. police will be under President Trump and the Attorney General Pam Bondi for the next 48 hours at least, unless Congress steps in to give him more time and authority overseeing them. And our colleagues at the Pentagon are reporting that 800 members of the National Guard are being brought in under Title 32, which would allow them potentially to have some arrest authority. But are those law enforcement officers going to be moved to neighborhoods, and we've reported this over the weekend as well, including the FBI and a number of other law enforcement? Are they going to go to places like the National Mall, where they're filled with tourists, going to museums, the parks throughout the city, of which there are many, especially used by local residents here constantly, or are they going to go to the areas of the city that maybe tourists wouldn't go to, where a lot of that crime is actually located and where it occurs?
Now, it's important to note, that Jake, that D.C. police officers have been in their own fight for more funding. Can you walk us through what's going on there?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of local criticism, not just aimed at the White House, but aimed at all of Congress in the last couple of weeks, because we know that one big beautiful bill actually cut tens of millions of dollars that would be used to backfill local police officers here in Washington, D.C., and to fund public safety initiatives. That money that strips money to major cities across the country, but specifically D.C., because it gets a lot of its budget from Capitol Hill and these annual budget packages, that money was stripped out. Lawmakers said that they would go back and fix that after the bill was signed. That hasn't happened yet. So currently there is a big tranche of money, as President Trump spoke at length about the number of D.C. police officers. Well, it's very hard to hire them if the budget is completely slashed for some of these positions. Obviously, in addition to that, whether these law enforcement officials who are brought in are actually going to, again, go to these areas that need it and police the areas of which there's crime, or to just simply be a photo op, of which you can see some of these pictures throughout the weekend, where really there were federal law enforcement operating in areas where there really is not a lot of people outside of tourists during the day, but really a lot of crime even at night.
CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Thanks so much, Jake. All right, let's go into more about this. Let's go to CBS News senior coordinating producer for the Crime and Public Safety Unit, Anna Schechter. Anna, great to see you. The president says the capital city has been taken over by violent gangs and criminals. Can you walk us through the numbers here, the crime statistics, and how it relates to other cities across the United States?
Well, sure. It's a great question because Washington, D.C. is tracking along national trend lines where we saw a spike in violent crime post-COVID, particularly in D.C. in 2023. But then that murder rate, aggravated assault, those kinds of crimes have been dropping last year and then also in the first half of 2025. So a lot of good news in terms of these trends. And you saw at the press conference, the FBI director, Kash Patel, even said so. He talked about the murder rate dropping and being at historic lows for the first part of this year, which...
I'm going to stop it right there. First of all, I want to do a commercial, do my advertisement for one of my sponsors. Visit Bayha Jackson's YouTube page and subscribe to learn more about sardines on the grill, fried chicken, near beer, and female adult strippers. Tell them Silly Sky sent you in the comments. And make sure you tell them that I'm always very thankful for what his contributions, and he definitely supports this program. Also, go to lifestrongapparel.com for your raw sea moss needs. Also, after making your purchases, type in SKYLER20 Scholar20 as a promo to receive 20% off your purchases. Tell Mr. Peng Silly Sky sent you. And also, and to end with, Dot Focus. Visit his page on YouTube, DOTFOCUS_1_. And subscribe, like, and comment. If you enjoy Call of Duty and other first-person shooters, you will not be disappointed. He's an assassin. He's a lethal nightmare walking with the digital pistols and rifles in his hand. So check him out. Tell him that the silly guy Sky Saunders sent you. Okay, just wanted to make sure I got those. There they go. Here we go. Yummy gummies. It's the sea moss more so, and the snapbacks for I'm trying to think of it right now. Oh my god. I gotta look at it. What is it? Lifestrongapparel.com. Lifestrongapparel.com. Okay, so I'm going to end on this video. We're going to wrap it up. All right, here we go.
Was sort of the opposite of what President Trump was describing. He is an expert at tapping into people's kind of emotions in terms of fears and the like. So we've had several high-profile crimes around the country, but particularly two in Washington, D.C., including a DOJ employee who was attacked in the midst of a carjacking. Now, carjacking numbers have been pretty high in D.C. They really did spike also in 2023. They are coming down, but that rate has not come down to pre-pandemic levels yet, but the trend is on the positive side, whereas murders really are down and aggravated assault, violent crimes are down, approaching pre-pandemic levels. And if the numbers so far this year continue, we'll be hitting likely those levels. So good news. And, if we look in historic context, think about the early 90s. The murder rate in Washington, D.C. was extremely high, way higher than even what we saw in 2023. So just a little bit of historic context, of course. Families and citizens want to have safe streets for their children. So President Trump was tapping into that in that very lengthy press conference that we all watched earlier today, Liz.
And Anna, what would complete federal control over the Metropolitan Police Department look like? Would there still be police officers patrolling the streets, or would it just be the National Guard?
Well, President Trump seemed to indicate that he wants to lean into the 3,000 or so local police officers who work at Metro PD. And what he said was that he wanted to empower them to be able to do their jobs. And in fact, this reflects what he put in an executive order earlier this year in March, essentially rolling back mechanisms for people to file lawsuits against law enforcement officers for things that they did in the line of duty. He also wanted to free up unused military equipment to go to local police officers. So he's really actually leaning into things he said he would do earlier this year. But I think he's tapping into the sort of zeitgeist right now, especially in the wake of that carjacking and also an intern, a congressional intern who was shot and killed in D.C. earlier this year. But, you know, we're doing a lot of fact checking over here. Yes, perception of crime in D.C. and other major cities. People feel like crime is high, but the numbers, at least in the last year, really don't tell that story. We're seeing improvements and really a positive trend with violent crime and auto theft and property crime on the downtrend.
Anna Schechter, thank you so much.
So there you have it, gentlemen and ladies, if you're out there in rebroadcast land. I want to know, I know why, but it's interesting that the Fox News didn't show the percentages of the crime that's gone down. Why didn't they show those percentages? I know why, but I'm just putting out the question. Why do you think they didn't show the percentages? All right, that's it for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I do hope that you have enjoy the rest of your day. Come back tomorrow morning with more. I have more Morning Sky, and I hope you take measures to have the best possible day. Thank you very much. Take care.